Dude, Bob, episode 3.
Already?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What's up?
All right. So, episode 3 of Subject Matter X, a weekly podcast powered by ContentPair, where we talk to subject matter experts, dive into a little bit about their career, how they got to where they are, and talk to them about what they know, what their area of expertise is. So, today we're talking to Dr. James Buffi. He is a Ph.D. in biomedical engineering, senior analyst for the Los Angeles Dodgers. For you non-sports heads, that's a Major League Baseball team. And he is an expert in the pitching motion. He helps the Dodgers optimize the performance of their pitching staff.
So in addition to how he found his way to the Dodgers, we're talking to Jimmy about the importance of his position in Major League Baseball. We find out if there is a perfect pitching motion. I think that's pretty interesting. What's allowing pitchers to throw over 100 miles an hour, and the future of sports technology. Where is it going? And this podcast is brought to you by ContentPair. So what we do at ContentPair is we match brands with subject matter experts, brands that need content and subject matter experts that want to share their knowledge and get their brand name out there by being published by larger, bigger brands. So if you are a business that produces content and want to be matched with somebody, or you consider yourself an expert and want to get your name and brand and knowledge out there, head over to ContentPair.com and sign up.
And so without any further ado, let's bring Jimmy onto the podcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have Jimmy Buffi, senior analyst, LA Dodgers. Jimmy, how the heck are you?
I'm doing great, man.
What's up, Jimmy? How you doing?
What's up, Bob?
So, Todd, another week of Subject Matter X.
Another week of Subject Matter X. And we have senior analyst of the LA Dodgers, Jimmy Buffi, for today's episode. This is going to be great. Jimmy, hey, I have a quick prediction. This year's World Series is going to be the Red Sox versus the Dodgers.
Oh, man, I am all about that.
Me too.
Hold on, but Todd, I think your actual prediction just got lost in there. I'd like you to repeat that for
It did. I want to make sure it's crystal
listening.
clear, because when October comes around, I want people to replay this episode. The Red Sox are going to win.
Oh, those are fighting words, man. Those are fighting words. So Jimmy, for those people listening who don't know you, obviously as well as I know you, you are one of my oldest friends in the entire. Actually, you are my oldest friend in the entire world.
Yeah, we've known each other since we were 0, Bob.
Yeah, we've known each other for 32 years. This is crazy. But yeah, so I'm really, really pumped to talk to you. I've been kind of lucky that I've gotten to talk to you about your research and your academic work, and now your job, this really amazing, badass job that you've got, right along. So I'm excited that everybody else kind of gets to come in on that conversation.
Thanks, Bob. You're flattering me.
Oh, yeah, man. So, all right. So Jimmy, here's what we know about you.
Uh-huh.
You got your PhD in biomedical engineering from Northwestern in Chicago.
Yep.
All right. Midway through your program, you were convinced that you were going to be doing like aeronautical engineering. You thought you were going to build an Iron Man suit. And then at some point you just kind of pivoted and ended up in baseball. And when you are not working with the Dodgers pitchers like Clayton Kershaw and Rich Hill and the rest of the pitching staff, you are recording music.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a
Right?
hobby.
It's just a hobby. All right. It's a pretty good hobby. I've heard the songs. They're great.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, he's really modest. He's a really modest guy. And pretty much everything. This is a bold statement, but pretty much everything that there is to know about the pitching motion.
I don't really know how much the world actually knows, to be honest.
But at the very least, you've studied this pretty extensively.
Yeah, I've studied it for a lot of years.
So that's that's exactly why we're so pumped to record this episode, because we want to know really, like, how did you become the expert in the pitching motion? And most importantly, like, how did you get this unique, well-respected, this mind-blowing job on the planet? I mean, you work for the LA Dodgers and you are in charge of how mechanically efficient the entire pitching staff is. In other words, you really study every single day the pitching motion. So let's just dive right in. How the hell did you get that position?
Let me tell you, it was it was a long and winding path, but I'm very happy how it worked out somehow. Um, yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but when I was 12 years old, actually, um, I'm kind of short. I mean, this is not video, so you don't know that, but I'm kind of short, and I couldn't throw very hard, but I still really wanted to be a pitcher. Um, so when I was 12 years old, I bought this book called The Science of Pitching, and I actually used it and it helped me a lot. I was like one of the first kids who learned how to throw a curveball. So like even when I was 12 years old, like the pitching motion was super interesting to me. And more importantly, like the science of pitching, like the mechanics of it, how your body does what it does. That was just fascinating to me. But like as you'll find out as I tell the story, like I didn't end up coming back to this until much later, just because I don't think I knew that like studying pitching could be a job. So yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
I
think many
mean,
people think that.
what's
Yeah,
that?
no, that's I don't think many people expect that's when they're 12 years old, they might think, "Oh man, I want to be on the mound," but they never really think like, "Oh man, I could be behind the scenes like helping the next generation of really amazing pitchers." I don't think that would occur to a 12-year-old.
Well, I mean, I still wanted. I was reading the book so I could make it to the major leagues.
Yeah. Oh, no, of course.
I mean, this is a backup option.
It's a pretty damn good backup.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fast forward a little bit, you ended up at Notre Dame for your undergrad
Mhm.
and you were studying what, mechanical engineering?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I didn't know that you know studying the mechanics of pitching, the science of pitching could be a thing. So I always loved math and science and building stuff. Um, Bob and I used to play with Legos a lot when we were little. So
Yeah, we sure did.
but yeah, so I decided to become a mechanical engineer. Actually, at Notre Dame, it was a combined mechanical and aerospace engineering degree. And yeah, and I really, really thought that I wanted to study airplanes and work on airplanes. And and for a while, like my first few years in Notre Dame, my dream job was actually to work for Boeing in St. Louis. I remember when I was a sophomore, everyone was trying to get their hardcore internship after their sophomore or their junior year, and Boeing was my dream company. I made best friends with the recruiter. We went out to dinner. I was like, I'm gonna nail this. I'm gonna get this job. It's gonna be awesome. My career is gonna be airplanes, and of course, I got rejected from that job. So yeah, I had to go to my backup plan, which wasn't a bad backup plan at all. I ended up getting an internship with GE Aviation in Lynn, Massachusetts, um, and that ended up being, it was a good job. I learned a lot, but I really decided that I did not actually want to be a mechanical slash aerospace engineer. And I decided, you know what, like I want to do something crazy. I want to do something different. And that was really it. Is like I looked around and I saw all these engineers and I was like, I want to do something different. What can I do that's different?
So you
Uh,
were just like, screw these normal jobs. I'm going to get a PhD.
yeah, yeah. I was like, there are so many things that are interesting to me. I want to I just want to be able to like study like cool stuff. Um so I decided, and I also decided, I thought back a little bit to, my childhood, and I always thought the human body was fascinating. I think in the back of my mind, like the science of movement was always a thing that was interesting to me, hence the pitching book. So I decided to get my PhD, or I decided to apply for a PhD in biomechanics and biomedical engineering. So I looked around and I found a great program at Northwestern, and thankfully I got into that program. And then yeah, I started studying um, the biomechanics actually of the human hand, but not at this point. I wasn't studying them for pitching.
Yeah,
I
you were studying prosthetics at one point, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I still to this at this point didn't know that studying pitching like could be a job, could be a thing. So I decided to more or less combine mechanical engineering and the human body, and I decided like let's build robot hands. Let's build an Iron Man suit. I was like that should be super cool and I'm going to love that. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
who wouldn't? Tony Stark all the way.
Yeah, seriously. That's the dream.
But of course, like things changed again, you know. So I was studying prosthetic hands. Specifically, I was studying the muscles of the forearm because the muscles of the forearm are the primary muscles that control the hand. I mean, there are a few muscles in the hand too, but a lot of the muscles that control your hand are actually in your forearm. So what I was doing is I was studying forearm muscles to see how you could potentially use those muscles to control a prosthetic hand if you were to lose your hand at the wrist. And this was, you know, for essentially for like military veterans. And, you know, this was really cool and really impactful. Um, but while I was studying this, I came across research on pitching and specifically how do the muscles of your forearm protect your elbow when you're pitching. And this was sort of like my light bulb moment. I was like, oh man, I love sports. I love baseball. I love pitching, math, science, mechanics, all this stuff. And I was like, holy crap, like I can make this a thing. So then what I did was I had a committee meeting. This was about halfway through my PhD. I gave the first 45 minutes of that meeting on prosthetic hands. And then just as like a little nugget, a little interesting tidbit, if you will, uh, the last 15 minutes, I talked about the importance of the forearm muscles for pitching. And I gave that presentation. And the funniest thing, my advisor was like, Jimmy, those last 15 minutes were way better than the first 45 minutes.
Were you at this point, did you look at them and were like, okay, that's cool? Or were you just absolutely devastated that you spent 45 minutes talking about this thing and they were like, nah, the last 15 was way better?
No, you know what? I was super pumped. I was like, dude, like this could be what I was meant to do. And so so we had this big conversation and it was still like uh a weird thing where my advisor and my committee were like, Jimmy, like it sounds like you're really passionate about, you know, the science of pitching, the mechanics of pitching, but we're just going to warn you that we think it'll be super hard to get a job in this field. We don't know what you'll do, but like if you really want to study it, we'll let you study it. And I was like, screw it, man. Let's do this thing.
I love that.
Yeah,
Love it.
that's amazing. Okay, so you're done at this point. You're done with your PhD.
Hmm.
How do you get from there to the Dodgers?
Yeah, well, so it actually started like during my PhD. Um, So, as I'm not sure how familiar people are with PhD programs, but as a normal part of a PhD program, you are expected to publish papers in scientific journals. So, I published a paper in this journal, and essentially, like, the topic was muscles matter for baseball pitching. Um, and up to that point, uh, pretty much no mechanical study on pitching ever mentioned muscles. So this was sort of, I mean, it wasn't like super revolutionary, but it was pretty novel for someone to study muscles and pitching at the same time. So this actually got the attention of some influential baseball people, and in particular, it got the attention of a company called Driveline Baseball. The president of Driveline Baseball, his name's Kyle Bodie, and he actually reached out to me after I wrote this paper, and he asked me if I wanted to consult for Driveline for a little while, and write articles for their website. So this was sort of like the kind of lucky break, I guess, that
Mhm.
you hear people talk about. And I feel super lucky that he found my work and he asked me to do this thing.
And so then the Dodgers were reading it on the internet and called you up and were like, "Hey Jimmy, we like this. Come work for us." Is that it can't be that easy, can it?
I mean, it was a process. I mean, that's a little bit what happened, but sort of two things happened at once. I started writing articles for Driveline, and at the same time, the Dodgers just so happened to be interviewing a good friend of mine from grad school named Megan Schroeder. And so the Dodgers were reading my stuff on the internet. They were talking to Megan, and they were like, man, we should probably just talk to this Jimmy guy. So that was awesome. And I talked to my now boss, and the funny part about it was, though, the first time he talked to me, um, he's like, Jimmy, I read what you wrote. I talked to Megan. What you do sounds really cool, but I don't really know like what kind of job you would do for us. So like the first thing he told me was, Jimmy, like make a pitch to us for like the type of job that you would want to have. So that was actually a back and forth for a few months and a few meetings and this and that. And then, yeah, eventually just we had a bunch of conversations and somehow they decided, hey, let's give this guy a shot.
So you had one of the most respected MLB organizations come to you and say, "Hey, pitch us on a job that you want within this organization." Like, I want to know a little bit about like how did that conversation go? What were you pitching? How did you pitch it? What was that process like?
I'm not sure how familiar people are with this technology, but my PhD was all based on um, taking motion capture data. So if people aren't familiar with motion capture, I mean, a lot of people are familiar with it from the movie Avatar. Like this is how they do computer animation, generally speaking, is they
That's
get
like
these
where you wear
suit.
the
Yeah.
suit with the little dots all over it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was what my PhD was about, is like analyzing movement data from pitchers. So yeah, my pitch to the Dodgers was really it was about the type of technology that we could potentially use to record this type of data and then all the cool stuff we could do with this data. And then at the same time, I sort of talked about my background in understanding muscle adaptation and tissue adaptation and mechanics. So, yeah, I think they saw a lot of synergies across a lot of different departments where, I could just help study pitching and help the Dodgers learn more about the pitching motion.
Were there other teams at that time doing this, or were you really one of the pioneers to pave this way?
I mean, it's hard to say. Teams are super secretive about, the people that they hire. Uh, from what I understand, there may have been a couple teams exploring this area, but I do think the Dodgers were one of, if not the first, to like dive in to biomechanics and the biomechanics of pitching.
So, Jim, I'm assuming this was part of your larger pitch to the Dodgers about what your job would be and why they should hire you. But why is this job, like why is what you're doing so important to Major League Baseball?
So, and it's still a problem now, a little less so, but way back, I say way back, it feels like way back. Back in like the mid 2000s, early 2010s, there was an injury that pitchers were sustaining at an insane rate. It was an elbow ligament injury that required Tommy John surgery. Um, and
And what
it's
is that for people who are listening that might not be as familiar?
Yeah, so the pitching motion is super, super stressful on a pitcher's elbow. Um, and therefore, like the ligaments of your elbow, so, they sustain the brunt of that force. And so what happens is, a pitcher's elbow will get worn down and that ligament will tear. And then you actually have to replace that ligament. And it generally costs a pitcher about 12 to 14 months. So he's out of action for that amount of time. Um, and there's only about an 80% success rate for the surgery. So like 20% of pitchers are having this injury and never coming back. Um, I mean, it's all the way down to youth baseball. Kids are getting this injury. So really, like the importance to Major League Baseball is just to keep the best players and the best pitchers on the field, because that's what everybody wants, right? That's what the fans want. That's what the teams want. That's what we all want. So it's like to prevent people from getting hurt.
So is there a perfect pitching motion that will help avoid this kind of injury?
Good question, man. Good question. And I would say, I mean, it's kind of a nuanced answer. I think that every body, like literally every human body, potentially has a perfect pitching motion, but there's not one general, unique, perfect pitching motion for everybody, if that makes sense.
That seems to be a common thread in the conversations that we've been having.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
there's no magic bullet for anything, really.
People nowadays just want that like magic answer, the one size that fits all. But we're hearing that over and over and over, very similar to this.
I mean, I think that's what I really want to do, is like help every person figure out what's going to make him or her the best possible athlete they can be. That's really like what I want to do in a nutshell.
It is wild to think that while you were getting your PhD, you were writing these articles on the side and these articles on the side that you were sharing your knowledge, sharing your expertise was being read by the Dodgers, which led to this opportunity.
Yeah, it just so happened that uh, this semi. Well, I mean, that's not doing driveline baseball justice. At the time, they were not as well known. Now they're huge, but but yeah, at the time they were sort of a small. They were a small baseball pitching development company, and it's kind of lucky that this influential company decided to give me a shot. They thought what I had to say was interesting.
What's allowing pitchers to throw 100-mile-an-hour fastballs? I really want to know. How does Chapman throw 102, hit 104? How does he do it?
Oh man, Whew. There is a lot we could talk about related to this question. I think that unfortunately for people who are not born with like certain body dimensions and characteristics, I think a pretty large portion of it is probably genetic. Um, I think there's a good portion that's genetic, and there's a really good portion that's technique. So really like you're trying to find uh, people who have the right genetics, the right joint ranges of motion, and then the people who can understand the technique. Because really, what pitching is all about is getting energy from the ground. So that's what you're doing. Essentially, this is the pitching motion in a nutshell. Is you are generating movement in your body that then impacts the ground. You push on the earth pushes back, and then you get all of this energy from the ground, and then you transfer this energy from the ground through your body, through your arm, and to the baseball. And so there are two things that help you do that. Um, the first is like I said, is probably like a lot of genetics, like joint ranges of motion, flexibility, tendon strength, muscle strength. And then the second part is your technique. How efficiently are you transferring that energy? Are your joints aligned in the right way? Is your elbow at the right angle relative to your torso? Is your torso at the right angle relative to your legs? And on it goes. So I think it's a super, super precise technique that pitchers practice over and over again their entire lives.
So it doesn't matter if you're, an Iron Mike, you're going from right over top down versus like, a submarine pitcher who's a little bit lower. It's really relative to how much energy they're producing.
Yeah, that actually brings up another sort of nuanced point is there might be, and as we talked about earlier, I think that there is an ideal pitching motion for a body, but ideal is actually like a kind of a nuanced thing because like you could think of ideal as maybe the fastest possible pitch that you can throw, or you can think of ideal as the pitch that will get the most people out at the major league level, and those aren't necessarily the same thing. If that makes sense, because
No,
like
that's a really great point.
deception plays a huge part, how the ball moves plays a huge part. So there are probably not probably there are a lot of really powerful trade-offs. Like maybe if you drop your arm a little bit, you'll throw a little bit harder, and maybe that is what you want. Or maybe you keep your arm a little bit higher and you get a different movement on the pitch, but you don't throw as hard. So it's this really nuanced thing, and that's why coaches are so important because
Mhm.
that's what their job is. Is their job is to try and get the most out of each pitcher. So they're the ones who are thinking about these trade offs and thinking what the best route is for a pitcher.
So that's interesting. Do you think there's any other sports that have that same type of mindset? Like as you were talking, I was thinking about a quarterback,
Hmm.
and my belief and what I know of the throwing motion of a quarterback is everybody should be relatively similar,
Hmm.
like the way they throw. Yeah, some people throw a little bit differently. Michael Vick kind of sidearms it. Um, like, are there any other sports that they have those types of trade offs?
I think there are trade offs like this in every sport. Like for quarterbacks in particular, um, some quarterbacks probably have a trade off between accuracy and velocity and arm strength. Like maybe they can be really accurate if they do a certain movement pattern, but then they can't get a lot on the football. And then if they want to throw a Hail Mary, Maybe they have to, lose some accuracy. Or I think about golf, like the different swings that you need for different clubs. Or tennis, like if you're trying to manipulate the ball in different ways, do you actually want to hit it as hard as you can? Or do you want to get side spin on the tennis ball? Or do you want to get top spin on the tennis ball? Yeah, I think like and I think this like underscores the importance of good coaches. Um, because like I think in sports a lot of times people people are sort of, I don't want to say scared because that's not the right word. Maybe intimidated by like scientific information and things like that. But you will always need an awesome coach who will help you work through all of these trade-offs and figure out like what is best for you, you know?
Is there a specific pitch that terrifies you? Like, is there one that you think can increase the pitcher's odds of actually getting injured?
Oh man, that is the age-old question. I don't know if I'm going to give you a satisfying answer. because because I think like a lot of things in life, it kind of depends what your body is trained for. So that's a big thing that I learned through my PhD, and I think it's just sort of it's a little bit of common sense, but like your body is really good at adapting to different things. So I think the most dangerous pitch is the one that you know don't train enough or don't practice enough. Like I think like a lot of people think that like curveballs are super dangerous or sliders are super dangerous. But I think if you were to really, you know, train properly, I think you could alleviate a lot of the danger that may or may not exist with those pitch types. I really think that it all comes down to training in a smart way and how you train.
So the common belief that we've heard is that pitchers are fragile.
Yeah.
Don't overthrow, limit the bullpens, monitor every single movement that they make. Do you have this belief?
No, I don't. I
Why
mean,
not?
that's a short way of saying that. Again, I think it comes down to like training. I think that pitching is a really intense thing, but I think that pitchers don't have to be fragile. I think that the body adapts to what you train it for. So if you don't want to be fragile, don't train to be fragile. I mean, you have to be smart. You have to progress in the right way. Um, you have to help your body adapt. You have to train slowly. You have to progress slowly. But I don't think that pitchers are fragile.
So, Jim, I want to jump back out of the technical aspects of pitching, and talk, like, go back to more about your role at the Dodgers. What is it like, or what has it been like for you building your position within this, like, very established organization, and especially bringing in this technological approach that really may not have existed, um, beforehand, into a very, very old school type of game like baseball?
Yeah, it's been crazy, man. It's been fun. Um, the Dodgers, they were looking to me and Megan to sort of bring this new field to the team, to the organization. So it was really like a very incremental, collaborative process where I spent a lot of time, and I still continue to spend a lot of time on the field with the coaches, with the players, and just understanding all of the things that they go through and all the things that they're thinking about. And then really what I'm trying to do is um, measure as much as we can. So I'm looking at all the things that we're doing, all the problems that people may have, and think about like what can we use to measure those things, and then how can these measurements be relayed to the coaches in a way that help the coaches be way better at their job and the pitchers be way better at their job. So it's been a super, super collaborative process where, um, you know, I talk to the coaches, we have great conversations and we figure out what we need. And the goal is, just to, um, put the best possible product on the field using the most cutting edge technology we possibly can.
And so one of the things that you're doing with that technology, just to jump back in, because I know Todd would kill me if I dragged you too far away from the baseball aspect of this. He loves this stuff. You're looking at the elbow. You're looking at how people injure the elbow, so either preventing it from getting hurt or helping them recover faster after they do. There's this age-old mindset, and again, this goes back to baseball being it's an old sport, it's an old mindset. Um, this this opinion that all elbow injuries are overuse injuries.
Mm.
So the solution is pitch less, right? And so you say that's completely wrong. Not obviously some injuries are overuse. I'm not saying that they're not. But the idea that all of them are, you're saying that's wrong. It's not always overuse. So what is it?
Yeah, I mean this relates back to what Todd asked me earlier about like, are pitchers fragile? I mean, they're definitely overuse injuries, but I think a lot of it has to do with again, they're not they're not overuse injuries. They're more like improper use injuries or improper preparation injuries. Because I keep going back to the fact that the human body can adapt to just about whatever you train it for. I mean, certainly it's possible to like reach the limits of human performance. Um, but I think that it's more about being smart in the way that you train and um, figure out what the goal is. I mean, I think from the late 90s to the early 2010s, pitching velocity has gone up and up and up and up, and I don't know if we've necessarily, as an industry, as a sport, adapted our pitcher training to effectively account for that increased velocity. So I think that, well, Tommy John injuries have started to decrease in recent years after spiking in the early to mid 2010s. So I think that in the past few years, people are getting smarter. But I think, yeah, it's all rather than like thinking about these things as, oh man, this is an overuse injury, pitchers need to pitch less. It's like, no, this is an improper training injury, and we actually have to train the pitchers better in order to use them in order to use them in the way we want to use them.
How does that training shift? So if like during the Tommy John era, it was a misuse byproduct,
Hmm.
what's being misused? What specifically about the training was causing more and more Tommy John injuries?
I think it was a little bit of like what you said is like, you know, people got injured, Tommy John injuries happened, and then people's gut reaction, and understandably so, like um, people's gut reaction was to have pitchers pitch less, right? If something causes a problem, you do less of it, and therefore you think you'll have less problems. But but really, I think that with these injuries, um, what really needed to happen and what is starting to happen now is like pitchers actually need to train harder and train more. Because if you're throwing harder, then you need essentially more muscle capacity, more tissue capacity to sustain your body when it's doing this crazy intense motion.
Mhm. So do you think that's why pitchers from the Japan League seem to be like unbreakable? I know that might be a very bold statement, but it seems like they can last longer in games and their pitch counts can go higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. In Japan, people pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch, and I mean, I don't really know the stats, so I don't want to like make any definitive statements. But it's anecdotally, it seems like there are less injuries, and I think that might be, that might be part of it. Is they're training their bodies for what they want to do. They're pitching more, and they may be getting injured less.
Mm. Yeah, I was looking up online and Bobby Valentine went over and coached in Japan for about 3 years. He was saying he was watching Daisuke Matsuzaka and the other Japanese pitchers train and develop. And he came back saying that he was convinced that we do a bad job of coaching our pitchers in the US and how we actually train them. And then Eddie Bain, the scouting director of the Los Angeles Angels, he told Sports Illustrated, he said their philosophy is if you're a pitcher, you need to throw. He said it makes sense for me. We're training our pitchers to throw less, and nobody wants to try anything different. So, hearing kind of everything that you just mentioned, do you agree with that? Why? Yes or no?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it comes back to exactly what we just, we've been talking about for the past few minutes is I think like you got to have the body adapt to what you want it to do. So if you want pitchers to be able to pitch more and throw harder, they need to pitch more and throw harder. Like you, you don't get you don't get better at something by doing it less, right? I mean, that and to be fair though, I mean, training requires rest. You need to train hard and rest. But again, there just needs to be a balance. Smarter training, better training, train the body for what you want it to do.
Yeah, so it can't all be rest.
Right.
That's just then you just end up a fat ass on the couch. Like me.
Great.
So yeah.
I was gonna say great point, Bob, but I didn't want to agree with the last thing you said.
How rude. Oh God. All right, Jim. So what about Little League? You played Little League when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
I never did. I never made it past farm when we were kids, but you were in Little League. You were Little League All-Stars. Were you pitching at the time when you were in Little League?
Yeah, man. I was reading The Science of Pitching.
So that was the only position you ever played in Little League?
No. I pitched. I played outfield, second base. I played like up the middle, as they say.
But so, I mean, I don't know if this, if you can think back to what it was like back then, or if you've seen anything since then, like with your work with Driveline, even if you've had exposure to this through the Dodgers, is there anything different, especially taking all of your research and all of your experience into account, anything different that you would change for how we're teaching our youth to pitch?
Yeah, I would.
Like, what would you tell 12-year-old Jimmy?
Yeah, good question. Coaches in general, Little League coaches, maybe not across the United States, who knows? But I think coaches are overconfident in their ability to teach pitching mechanics. I think when I was little, I was taught like a very, very specific pitching delivery, and it was sort of like pitch by numbers. It was like, step 1, put your foot back. Step 2, lift your knee, And I think that fosters like a very mechanical, unathletic pitching motion. So I would change it in that I would just tell myself to just try and throw hard. Like this is the general thing that you need to do. You need to like lift your knee, rock back, and fire. But like, I'm not going to give you specific instruction about like where to put your knee and how to put your arms. I'm just going to let you feel what you need to feel, because of that, I think, is a better way to learn. Just because it's so hard to know, like we talked about earlier, it's so hard to know like the perfect pitching motion, and like I think certainly you need some coaching. You need to be in the right neighborhood, but I think you need to give kids a little bit more leeway to experience and just try and throw hard.
Jim, how has it been introducing a new technology into the Dodgers, into this established organization?
It's been a process, man. Just because, just like anything, when people are established in their ways and in their processes, they get comfortable. It's what they know. It's been working. So a lot of times, people are intimidated a little bit. So I think the really important thing is two things. Is when you're working with people who are, established in these ways that are a little outdated, you need to collaborate with them and understand like where are their pain points, and you need to find technology that addresses their pain points, and show them how it addresses their pain points. And also at the same time, I think you need to learn, for lack of better terminology, their language, like the way they speak about what they do, and then make the technology accessible because not everybody has like crazy, insane training in like super technical fields. So I think you have to address pain points and then make the technology accessible by talking about it in a language that everybody's familiar with.
So you can't just drag them kicking and screaming into the 21st century and expect everybody to come along for the ride.
Right, right.
You have
Like
to use a little bit more finesse.
yeah, like my biggest pet peeve, man. Like I've seen these technology companies come in and they're like super overconfident, and it's like this technology is going to solve all your problems and it's going to make your coaches obsolete, and you won't need this person, you won't need that person. And it's like, no, dude, that's not what it's going to do. Like the technology is a supplement. It's a way to make everybody better at their jobs. You know, there's no like high and mighty, all powerful technology. Really, the point of technology is to enhance the humans, not replace the humans.
And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but for anybody listening out there who might have some interest in this, how did they get into sports? This is the 12-year-old Jimmy who wanted to be a major league pitcher, and then 20 years later is working in Major League Baseball, but not on the mound, but helping the mound. Like, how do you do that?
Oh boy, I mean, it was a meandering journey for me. But I think like the what I would say is try and be unique, right? Like right now, if you're trying to get into baseball, like inventing a new version of on base percentage is not going to get you into baseball. Like there's 1,000 people who are inventing a new version of this stat and a new version of that stat, and you're just going to be one of like the thousands of people, I should say, that are doing that. I think what you need to do is figure out what your special skill is, what you like, what you're good at that other people maybe aren't as good at, and find a unique way to express that. So for me, that was, and I didn't, I just sort of happened upon this path. I mean, it was sort of intentional in that, like, at every fork in the road, I I thought about like, what am I super passionate about? What am I good at? Let me go in the direction that follows my passion and helps me express what I'm good at. Um, but for me, yeah, it was like what I'm good at is math and science, and but I also played a lot of sports, and so combining like math and science with my knowledge of baseball and sports and movement made me unique in that baseball is has generally not been very scientific when it comes to understanding the human body. And really, I think that's where um, baseball is going is um, thinking about what is the body doing.
Yeah, where do you see kind of your position in the next 5 to 10 years? Like how is it adapting? Where is it going?
Yeah. So, like I started to say, I think that during the Moneyball revolution, we sort of started to really understand outcomes. You know, like a batter steps up to the plate, he hits a double, he gets on base, and how valuable is that outcome? And therefore, how valuable is the batter given that he gets these outcomes? Um, Over the past like 5 years or so, we've been moving earlier to what was the baseball doing that achieved these outcomes? Like now, all you hear people talking about are spin rate and pitch movement and launch angle and exit velocity. So these are the things that are a little bit earlier in the process than the outcome. So before it was like, that was a double. Now we step back and it was like, this was the exit velocity and launch angle that produced that double. And I think the next paradigm and sort of, what I'm trying to work on is what was the body doing to produce that exit angle, that launch angle, that exit velocity? What was the body doing to produce that pitch velocity, and how can we optimize that? So I think baseball keeps moving earlier and earlier in the process, if that makes sense.
So at some point, you guys are just going to be trying to put on an Ant-Man suit and go down to the subatomic level and tweak stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to continue that thread, first it's the double, move it back, it's the launch angle, Move it back. It's like, what did your arms do to produce that launch angle? Move it back. What did your brain do to produce what your arms did to produce that launch angle, to produce that double?
Wow.
Wow. So where does it end?
Oh man, that's
The subatomic level, right,
then-
Bob?
then you start getting into Inception and just really getting into
Exactly.
people's dreams, and it's a whole thing.
It's a whole
Oh,
thing.
man.
Still laughing from the Ant-Man comment.
Thanks a lot, Jim. This was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For anybody listening who wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
I guess probably Twitter. My Twitter handle is @JamesHBuffy.
BUFFI.
Yeah, not BUFFY, not the Vampire Slayer.
All right, Jim. We really enjoyed this conversation. I hope everybody listening
Yeah, I
does
enjoyed
too.
it too.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode with Jimmy, head on over to iTunes. We'd appreciate a rating and a review. If you'd like to connect with us on social media, we are at SMX Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us on the web at subjectmatterx.com, and you can subscribe to the podcast on your listening platform of choice. We are on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, SoundCloud, really like
You
a
name
lot
it.
of places.
Yeah.
Um,
Covers the whole
yeah.
gamut.
Head on over, subscribe so that new episodes of Subject Matter X will come straight to the listening device of your choice.
And remember that Subject Matter X is always brought to you by ContentPair. If you are a brand and you want to produce content that is written or authored by a subject matter expert, or if you consider yourself an expert and you want to get your knowledge, brand name, you want to increase your reach, get published by a well-recognizable business blog, head over to ContentPair.com. Both of you can sign up and we will connect you with the right opportunity. So thanks for listening.
Awesome. We'll see you next week.